How a poor stable boy fulfilled a rancher's dying wish. The dying rancher's last words. The autumn wind whistled through the gaps in the old barn walls as 16-year-old Thomas Miller carefully brushed down Thunder, the magnificent black stallion that belonged to Mr. Harrison, the wealthiest rancher in Cedar Valley. Thomas has been working at the Harrison Ranch for 3 years now, ever since his father died in a mining accident and left him and his mother with nothing but debt and desperation. The stable boy's hands were rough and calloused from years of hard labor, but they moved with gentle precision as he tended to the horses. It was honest work, though it barely paid enough to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads in the small cabin they rented on the outskirts of town. Tomás never complained, so he was grateful for any opportunity to earn an honest living, and he genuinely loved working with the animals. Tomás came a weak voice from the direction of the main house. It was Mrs. Harrison, her usually pristine appearance disheveled with worry. "Come quickly, Mr. Harrison is asking for you." Tomás dropped the brush and ran toward the imposing 2-story ranch house, his heart pounding with concern. For the past month, everyone in Cedar Valley had known that Samuel Harrison was dying. The cancer had spread throughout his body, and the doctor had given him only weeks to live. What Tomás couldn't understand was why the richest man in the county would want to see a poor stable boy in his final moments. As Tomás entered the dimly lit bedroom, the smell of medicine and impending death filled his nostrils. Mr. Harrison lay propped up against severe pillows, just on a robust frame now gaunt and frail. His años, however, still held the sharp intelligence that retorna sobre la voz perle. "Tomás, my boy," Mr. Harrison wheezed, gesturing for him to come closer. "I need to tell you something important, something that will change your life forever." The rancher's eyes studied Tomás's face intently, as if searching for something. "You know me to get my Walker, son. Honest, reliable, keen to the animals. I've been watching you these past 3 years, and I see something in you that reminds me of myself when I was your age." Tomás remained silent, unsure of how to respond to such unexpected praise from a man he had always admired from afar. "I never had children of my own," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice growing weaker. "Movallos. My dear wife and I tried for years, but it wasn't a man to be. This ranch, everything I've built, it needs to go to someone who will care for it the way I have. Someone who understands that it's not just about the money or the land, but about the legacy, the responsibility to the community, to the animals, to the people who depend on this place for their livelihood." Miss Harrison stood on the corner, tears streaming down her face. She nodded encouragingly at her husband, as if they had discussed this moment many times before. "Tomás," Mr. Harrison said, reaching out with a trembling hand to grasp the boy's wrist, "I'm leaving you the ranch, all of it, the land, the cattle, the horses, the buildings, everything. But there's a condition. Poor stable boys didn't inherit vast ranches from dying millionaires. Sir, if you don't understand, surely you have family, relatives who consider it felice." "Listen to me carefully," Mr. Harrison interrupted, his grip tightening with surprising strength. "The condition is this. You must find and fulfill 3 wishes of people in this community who have helped others but never asked for anything in return. You have 1 year from the day I die to complete this task. If you succeed, the ranch is yours forever. If you fail, it will be sold, and bacona viljon vat testomo. If you feel the salento da firinequeda, yo me fes yo plena proces quadifamoronomia. Pues estamos still soferetando todos o aptirorasaki dipses, todos aptirorasaki diprade. Peterson fixed her fence last winter without being make a stack. You gave your lunch to the Martinez children when their father was out of work. You stayed up all night with Buttercup when she was falling, even though it wasn't your responsibility. You have the artist ranch needs. Are you inspired by stories of unexpected kindness and life-changing opportunities? Subscribe to our newsletter for more heartwarming tales that will restore your faith in humanity. Tomás felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Pero sir, I don't know anything about running a ranch this size. I'm just a stable boy." "You'll learn," Mr. Harrison said with confidence. "Mrs. Harrison will help you for the first few months, and I've arranged for my foreman Jake to stay on and guide you. But remember, Tomás, the 3 wishes must come from your heart. You can't simply ask people what they want. You must observe, Listen and discover cuando Wanaki populación y todos caballos, Toyon Rancher reached under his pillow and pulled out a leather-bound journal. This contains everything you need to know about running the ranch, plus some thoughts I've written about the people in our community. Study it well. As Thomas took the journal with trembling hands, Mr. Harrison's breathing became more labored. Promise me, son. Promise me you'll try. I promise, Mr. Harrison. I swear on my father's grave that I'll do everything in my power to fulfill your wish. The old man smiled one last time, closed his eyes, and within minutes, Samuel Harrison drew his final breath, leaving Thomas Miller holding a journal that would either make him one of the richest young men in the state or send him back to a life of poverty and uncertainty. 3 days after Mr. Harrison's funeral, Thomas sat in the ranch office, staring at the leather journal and a stack of legal documents that firmado the temporary owner of the Harrison Ranch. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. The ranch employed 15 full-time workers, supported dozens of families in the community, and generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue each year. Harrison had been true to her word, spending hours each day teaching Thomas about the business side of ranching. She showed him the account books, explained the contracts for its buyers, and introduced him to the bank officials who handled the ranch's finances. Despite her grief, she seemed genuinely committed to helping Thomas succeed. The most important thing to remember, she told him as they reviewed the monthly expenses, is that Samuel didn't build this ranch just to make money. He built it as a cornerstone of the community. Every decision they make should consider not profit, para que the impact on the people had depend on this place. Thomas nodded, though he felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the article. He had been studying the journal every night, reading Mr. Harrison's observations about various community members, and trying to identify potential candidates for the 3 wishes he needed to fulfill. Jake Morrison, the ranch foreman, had been skeptical at first about taking orders from a 16-year-old former stable boy, but he gradually warmed up to Thomas when he saw the young man's genuine desire to learn and his natural way with the animals. Jake was a weathered man in his 50s who had worked for Mr. Harrison for over 20 years. The old man was a good judge of character, Jake admitted one morning as they checked on the cattle in the north pasture. You've seen plenty of rich folks' kids who couldn't tell a bull from a heifer, but you got instincts, you listen to the animals, and they trust you. That's worth more than all the book learning in the world. As the weeks passed, Thomas threw himself into learning every aspect of ranch management, while keeping his eyes and ears open for opportunities to fulfill the 3 wishes. He attended town council meetings, helped at community events, and made a point of talking to people throughout Cedar Valley. Conversations that Thomas first learned about Maria Santos, a widow who ran a small bakery in town. Mrs. Harrison had mentioned her in passing, noting that Maria often donated bread to families in need, but struggled to keep her own business afloat. Tomás decided to visit the bakery one afternoon, ostensibly to buy some bread for the ranch hands. The Spanish shop was immaculately clean, but showed signs of age and wear. Maria, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, greeted him warmly. "You're the young man who inherited the Harrison Ranch," she said with a smile. "The whole town is talking about you. Mr. Harrison was a good man. He used to be bread here every week, even though I'm sure he could afford much fancier food." As Thomas looked around the bakery, he noticed several things: the old oven that seemed to be held together with prayers and determination, the cracked display case, and the small sign advertising day-old bread half price that suggested Maria was struggling financially. "Your bread is wonderful," Thomas said genuinely, having tasted some of her work at community gatherings. "You must be very busy." Maria's smile faltered slightly. "Business has been challenging lately. The new supermarket on the highway has a bakery section, and they can sell bread much cheaper than I can. But I keep going because this bakery was my husband's dream, and because—" She paused, looking embarrassed. "Because what?" Thomas prompted gently. "Because there are families in town who depend on me every day. I set aside bread that doesn't sell and take it to the Martinez family, the Johnsons, and old Mr. Kowalski. They're too proud to ask for help, but they need it. If I close the bakery, I don't know how they'll manage." Thomas felt his heart stir. Here was someone who was sacrificing her own financial stability to help others, exactly the kind of person Mr. Harrison had described. But he needed to be careful not to reveal his true purpose.
Have you thought about expanding or modernizing? He asked. Maria laughed. There was no more, Nictio. There's no money. The bank won't give me a loan because I'm already behind on my current payments. I've looked into getting a new oven, fixing the display case, maybe even adding a small cafe area, but it would cost more than I could make in 5 years. Having Thomas made his first entry in a notebook, he had started keeping track of potential wishes.
Maria Santos, bakery owner who helps feed struggling families despite her own financial difficulties. Possibly wish modernize bakery to make it competitive while allowing her to continue helping others. Over the following weeks, Thomas continued his observations while learning to manage the ranch. He was getting better at reading the financial reports, understanding the cattle market, and making decisions about feed, veterinary care, and equipment maintenance. The ranch hands had accepted him as their boss, partly because of his genuine respect for their expertise, and partly because of his afraid to get his hands dirty alongside them. It was during a particularly difficult week when they lost 3 calves to a sudden illness and had to deal with a broken water pump that Thomas encountered his second potential wish recipient. Dr. Elizabeth Chen had been the only doctor in Cedar Valley for 15 years. She ran a small clinic in herself not just on a town, but on just the surrounding rural areas. Thomas had met her when she came to examine the sick calves, and he was impressed by her dedication and expertise. I'm not just a veterinarian, she explained as she examined the animals. In a community this small, you wear many hats. I treat everything from horses to hamsters, and sometimes I even help out when the human doctor is unavailable. As Thomas watched her work, he noticed the outdated equipment in her mobile veterinary unit in Sirbo de la Forer watching Takefir. Tos que stemmer rechen tenor en tenpanco. Gualquier non das the Dr. Chen was characteristically modest. We make do with what we have, she said. The important thing is that the animals get care. I've been saving up for some new diagnostic equipment, but every time I get close to having enough money, there's an emergency. Last month, the Sindason Priest Bull got sick, and they couldn't afford treatment. The Sindason Priest Bull dog needed surgery. I can't turn away animals just because their owners can't pay. Thomas made another entry in his notebook. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, veterinarian, who provides care regardless of owner's ability to pay, often uses her own money to help animals in need. Possibly wish modern diagnostic equipment to better serve the community. As autumn turna feledin, Thomas feler opressor in diadalnai de line. He had to identify 2 potential wish recipients, but he still needed to find a third, and more importantly, he needed to figure out how to fulfill their wishes without revealing the true reason behind his generosity. The answer to his third wish came from an unexpected source, his own past. Winter brought now challenges to the ranch, and Thomas found himself working longer hours to ensure the cattle had adequate shelter and feed. It was during one of these long days that he received an unexpected visitor, his former teacher, Miss Sarah Thompson. Miss Thompson had taught at the one-room schoolhouse that served the rural children of Cedar Valley, including Thomas before he had to leave school to work full-time. She was a woman in her 30s who had dedicated her life to education despite receiving a salary that barely covered her basic needs. Thomas, she said, her face beaming with pride as she stood in the ranch office. I had to come see for myself. The whole county is talking about the stable boy who inherited the Harrison Ranch. I always knew you were special. Luke had nothing to do with it. Even firmly, Samuel Harrison was known for his shrewd judgment. He saw something in you that you probably don't even see in yourself. As the man talked, Thomas learned that Miss Thompson was facing a crisis of her own. The state was threatening to close the rural schoolhouse due to declining enrollment and budget cuts. The children would have to travel over an hour each way to attend school in the county seat, a journey many families couldn't afford to make regularly. I've been fighting this for months, Miss Thompson explained, her usual optimism dimmed by frustration. I've written letters, attended meetings, even offered to take a pay cut. But the numbers don't lie. We only have 12 students, and the state says it's not cost-effective to keep the school open. Thomas talk about no educación, cut short by necessity. He remembered how Miss Thompson had stayed after school to help him with difficult lessons. how she had lent him books to take home and how she had encouraged his love of reading even when other people suggested that a poor boy should focus on practical skills. What would it take to keep the school open, he asked. Miss Thompson sighed. The state would reconsider if we could demonstrate community support and find a way to supplement the funding body a supplemente fitonan ginarortiwarato. Dagli stato portitonan al grasso the church hall plus some improvements to the building to meet current safety standards. The roof leaks, the heating system is ancient, and we desperately need new books and supplies. That evening, Thomas made his third entry. Miss Sarah Thompson, teacher who has dedicated her life to educating rural children, facing school closure, that will leave mano children without access to education. Possible wish. Sabe the school and improve its facilities. No Thomas, Outenfaun, Jointenfaun, Navonplens tamante contatom, Boan, Tempets, which are within Bismaupodo, El Nator Lokiwil, to which are within Plantum Motivation. Mr. Harrison had been clear that the wishes needed to come from Thomas's heart, not from a sense of obligation to inherit the ranch. As he pondered this problem, Thomas realized that the solution lay in understanding what Mr. Harrison had really been teaching him. The old rancher hadn't just wanted Thomas to give away money. He had wanted him to learn how to be a true leader in the community, someone who could identify needs and find creative ways to address them. With this insight, Thomas began to develop a plan for Maria's Bakery. He decided to approach the problem as a business opportunity rather than charity. He visited Maria again and proposed a partnership. The ranch would contract with her bakery to provide all the bread and baked goods for the ranch hands meals, plus catering for special events. In exchange, Thomas would help her secure a business loan by offering the ranch as collateral. But that's too much risk for you, Maria protested when Thomas explained his proposal. What if the bakery fails? It won't fail, Thomas explained. Your bread is the best in the county, and with some modern equipment and a reliable customer base, you'll be able to compete with anyone. Plus, I have an idea for expanding your community service. Thomas's idea was to create a community bread program where local businesses and individuals could sponsor loaves of bread for families in need. The bakery would bake the bread, and sponsors would cover the cost, allowing Maria to help people without sacrificing her own financial stability. Within a month, Maria secured her loan, ordered new equipment, and launched the community bread program. The bakery was busier than it had been in years, and Maria was able to help more families than ever before. Want to stay connected with inspiring stories like this one? Join our community of readers who believe in the power of kindness to change lives. Subscribe now and never miss an update. For Dr. Chen, Thomas took a different approach. He organized a veterinary equipment drive throughout the county, reaching out to other ranchers, farmers, and animal lovers to contribute to a fund for purchasing modern diagnostic equipment. Thomas made the first substantial contribution, but he ensured that the community felt ownership of the project. The campaign was a huge success, raising enough money not only for the diagnostic equipment Chen needed but also for a mobile surgery unit that would allow her to perform more complex procedures on site. The entire community celebrated when the new equipment arrived, and Dr. Chen was able to provide even better care to animals throughout the region. Miss Thompson's situation required the most delicate handling. Thomas couldn't simply donate the money to keep the school open without raising questions about where a 16-year-old ranch owner had gotten such funds. Instead, he worked with Mrs. Harrison and Jake to develop a comprehensive plan. First, they established a Rural Education Foundation with contributions from the ranch and several other local businesses. Then, they organized a community workday to repair and improve the schoolhouse, with the ranch providing materials and equipment. Finally, Thomas arranged for the ranch to hire Miss Thompson as a part-time tutor for the ranch hands children, supplementing her teaching salary. The combination of community support, improved facilities, and demonstrated local investment convinced the state to keep the school open. Miss Thompson was overjoyed, and the entire community rallied around the little schoolhouse that had been saved. As the spring arrived, Thomas reflected on what he had accomplished. He had successfully identified and fulfilled 3 wishes, but more importantly, he had learned how to be a true community leader. Each project had required him to think creatively, build partnerships, and inspire others to contribute to something larger than themselves. But Thomas's greatest test was yet to come. As the 1-year deadline approached, Thomas felt confident that he had fulfilled Mr. Harrison's requirements. The 3 wishes had been completed successfully, and each had made a meaningful difference in the community. Maria's bakery was thriving, Chin was providing better veterinary care than ever before, and the rural schoolhouse had been saved and improved. However, Thomas's confidence was shaken when he received an unexpected visit from Miss Harrison's nephew, Robert Harrison, a lawyer from the state capital who had been contesting the will since his uncle's death. "This whole arrangement is preposterous," Robert declared as he stormed into the ranch office with his own lawyer in tow. "My uncle was clearly not in his right mind when he made this will. No sane person leaves a multi-million-dollar ranch to a teenage stable boy." Thomas tried to remain calm, though his heart was racing. "Mr. Harrison was very clear about his wishes, and I've done everything he asked of me." Robert laughed coldly. "Oh yes, the mysterious 3 wishes requirement. Very convenient that there's no specific documentation of what these wishes were supposed to be. For all we know, you could have made up any 3 random acts of charity and claimed they fulfilled the condition." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. Robert was right that the specific wishes hadn't been documented in the will. Mr. Harrison had trusted Thomas to understand the spirit of the requirement, rather than just the letter of it. "We have witnesses," Thomas said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Mrs. Harrison was there when your uncle explained the conditions to me." "My aunt is grieving and elderly," Robert replied dismissively. "Her testimony wouldn't hold up in court, especially since she stands to benefit from this arrangement by remaining on the ranch." Over the following weeks, Robert Harrison mounted a serious legal challenge to the will. He hired investigators to look into Thomas's background, questioned the ranch employees about Thomas's qualifications, and argued that the 3 wishes requirement was too vague to be legally enforceable. The stress of the legal battle began to take its toll on Thomas. He found it difficult to concentrate on ranch management, and he worried constantly about what would happen to the employees and the community projects he had started if he lost the ranch. It was during this dark period that Thomas discovered the true test of character that Mr. Harrison had built into his plan. One evening, as Thomas was reviewing financial reports in the ranch office, Mrs. Harrison knocked on the door. Her face was grave, and she carried a sealed envelope in her hands. "Thomas," she said, "I found this among Samuel's papers. It's addressed to you, to be opened only if the will was contested." With trembling hands, Thomas opened the envelope and read the letter inside. "My dear Thomas, if you are reading this, it means that someone is challenging my decision to leave you the ranch. He expected this might happen, which is why I'm writing this letter. The 3 wishes I asked you to fulfill were never really about the specific acts of kindness you performed. They were about teaching you to see the needs of others, to think creatively about solutions, and to understand that true wealth comes from the positive impact you have on the world around you. By now you have learned to run the ranch, to lead people and to be a pillar of the community. You have proven that my faith in you was justified. But now comes the real test. I have left instructions with my lawyer that if the will is contested, you will be given a choice. You can fight the legal battle and probably win, keeping the ranch and all its wealth. Or you can walk away, taking only a modest sum that will ensure you and your mother are comfortable for the rest of your lives. If you choose to fight and win, you will be rich, but you will always wonder if people respect you for who you are or for what you own. If you choose to walk away, you will have proven that you truly understood the lessons I tried to teach you. The choice is yours, my boy. Either way, I am proud of the man you have become. Your friend and mentor, Samuel Harrison, P.S. There is one more thing. If you choose to walk away, check the deed to your mother's cabin. You might find a surprise. Thomas read the letter 3 times, his mind reeling. Mr. Harrison had anticipated this exact situation and had given him an impossible choice. Fight for the ranch and risk becoming the kind of person who was defined by wealth, or walk away and lose everything he had worked for. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He walked around the ranch, visiting the horses in the stable where he had started as a poor stable boy, looking out over the vast pastures where cattle grazed peacefully and thinking about all the people whose lives had been touched by the projects he had initiated. As dawn broke, Thomas made his decision. He called Robert Harrison and his lawyer and asked them to meet him at the ranch office. When they arrived, expecting to discuss a settlement, Thomas surprised them with his announcement. "I'm withdrawing my claim to the ranch," Thomas said simply. "You can have it." Robert's lawyer looked suspicious. "What's the catch? What do you want in return?" "I want the ranch to be sold to someone who will continue to operate it as a working ranch and who will honor the employment contracts of all current workers. We want the new owner to maintain the community programs we've established. And I want a modest settlement that will allow me to start my own small operation." Robert was clearly puzzled by this turn of events, but he was also eager to close the deal before Thomas changed his mind. Within a week, the legal papers were signed, and Thomas Miller was no longer the owner of the Harrison Ranch. The day after Thomas signed away his claim to the ranch, he and his mother went to the county courthouse to check the deed to their small cabin. As Mr. Harrison's letter had suggested, what they discovered there left them both speechless. The deed showed that Samuel Harrison had quietly purchased their cabin and the surrounding 50 acres 3 years earlier, shortly after Thomas started working at the ranch. The property had been held in trust, with instructions that it would be transferred to Thomas's mother upon Harrison's death, regardless of what happened with the ranch. But that wasn't all. Attached to the deed was another letter from Harrison. "Thomas, if you are reading this, it means you made the choice I hoped you would make. You chose character over wealth, principle over profit. This is why I knew you were the right person to inherit my true legacy. The 50 acres around your cabin contain some of the richest grazing land in the county. There is also a natural spring that never runs dry and mineral rights that could prove valuable someday. More importantly, this land is yours free and clear, with no debt or obligations. In the barn behind your cabin, you will find a gift from me, 12 of the finest breeding cattle in the state, along with equipment and enough feed to get you started. We have also arranged for Jake Morrison to work with you as a partner, if he chooses, and I have established a trust fund that will provide modest but steady income for you and your mother for the rest of your lives. You see, my boy, I never intended for you to keep the big ranch forever. I wanted you to learn how to run it, how to lead people, and how to make a difference in your community. But I also wanted you to understand that true success comes from building something yourself, not from inheriting someone else's work. Start small, grow slowly, and never forget the lessons you learned this year. The community needs leaders who understand that wealth is a tool for helping others, not an end in itself. Your proud mentor, Samuel Harrison. Maria's agreed to provide all the baked goods for your new operation. Dr. Chen will be your veterinarian, and Miss Thompson would like to tutor any children of workers you might hire someday. It seems you've built quite a network of friends. Thomas sat down heavily on the courthouse steps, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Mr. Harrison had planned. The old rancher had orchestrated everything, from the legal challenge to the final revelation, to teach Thomas the most important lesson of all, that true wealth comes not from what you own, but from what you build and whom you help along the way. Over the following months, Thomas threw himself into building his own ranch. It was hard work, starting with just 50 acres and 12 cattle, but it was honest work that he could take pride in. Jake Morrison, did indeed choose to become his partner, bringing decades of experience and a network of contacts throughout the cattle industry. The Miller Morrison Ranch started small, but it grew steadily. Thomas applied everything he had learned during his year managing the Harrison Ranch, but he also brought his own vision and values to the operation. He paid his workers fair wages, maintained high standards for animal care, and continued to be active in community projects. Maria's bakery continued to thrive, and she never forgot Thomas's role in saving her business. She insisted on providing bread for the ranch at cost, and she often sent extra treats for the workers. The community bread program had grown to serve dozens of families, supported by contributions from throughout the county. Dr. Chen's practice flourished with her new equipment, and she became known throughout the region for her expertise and compassion. She provided veterinary services to Thomas's ranch at a discount, grateful for his role in securing the equipment that had transformed her practice. Miss Thompson's school not only remained open but became a model for rural education. The Rural Education Foundation that Thomas had helped establish grew to support several small schools throughout the region. Miss Thompson often brought her students to visit the ranch, where they learned about agriculture and animal husbandry. 5 years after inheriting and giving up the Harrison Ranch, Thomas Miller was widely respected throughout Cedar Valley as a successful rancher, community leader, and mentor to young people. He had married Dr. Chen's younger sister, Anna, and they were expecting their first child. The Harrison Ranch itself had been sold to a consortium of investors who operated it efficiently, but without the community focus that had characterized Samuel Harrison's ownership. The new owners honored their commitments to the workers and community programs, but it was clear that their primary interest was profit rather than community building. One autumn evening, as Thomas sat on the porch of the house he had built on his 50 acres, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about Miss Harrison's wisdom in creating a test that would teach him the difference between inheriting wealth and earning it, between owning a business and building a legacy. His mother, now healthy and comfortable thanks to the trust fund Mr. Harrison had established, joined him on the porch. "Do you ever regret giving up the big ranch?" she asked. Thomas looked out over his modest but thriving operation where cattle grazed peacefully in the evening light. He thought about the workers who depended on him for their livelihoods, the community projects he continued to support, and the family he was building with Anna. "No, Mama," he said with a smile. "I think Mr. Harrison knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't just give me a ranch. He gave me the tools to build a life worth living. The big ranch was never really mine to keep. But this," he gestured toward the land around them, "this is something I built myself, and that makes all the difference." As the sun set over Cedar Valley, Thomas Miller understood that he had received the greatest inheritance of all, the knowledge that true wealth comes not from what you own, but from what you give, what you build, and whom you help along the way. Samuel Harrison's dying wish had been fulfilled in ways that neither of them could have fully imagined, creating a legacy that would continue to benefit the community for generations to come. The poor stable boy had indeed fulfilled the rancher's dying wish, but in doing so, he had discovered that the real treasure was not the ranch itself, but the wisdom, character, and community connections he had gained along the way. And that inheritance would last him a lifetime.